My hand slipped and touched her chest. That's all I can say. It truly was an anime-esque moment. Kind of fitting since I'm such an anime nerd, but
That is Earl Dube, better known online as TheWhiteBowser. And before you assume I cherry picked the weirdest possible sentence out of context, Earl once wrote a Reddit confession about this incident. Its title? The Day My Life Turned Into an Anime. But Earl's story really blew up after he tried to expose somebody else. So, who the heck is TheWhiteBowser, and how did getting kicked out of a Discord server lead the internet straight to that confession? Give me 5 minutes and you'll find out. Before most people knew who Earl was, he already had a pretty ugly digital footprint. Most importantly, Earl had posted to r/confessions about an incident involving a younger female coworker. And yes, the post was actually titled The Day My Life Turned Into an Anime, but at the time it was relatively buried. It was not the post itself that suddenly made Earl infamous. That came later. Earl was active in Smokey MCC's Discord server, where he developed a pattern of what I am going to summarize for the sake of our rapidly disappearing timer as heinous behavior. Eventually, Smokey removed him from the server. Earl did not take this particularly well. Instead of just leaving, Earl made a now deleted YouTube video about Smokey. And that was a spectacularly bad decision, because when Earl was later challenged about that accusation, he admitted that it was false, and he said he made it because he wanted to get people off his back.
How does that make Smokey a pedophile?
all right. I said that false accusation because I want people to get off my back.
And making an accusation that serious naturally made people wonder, who exactly is this guy making the accusation? So people started digging into Earl, and they found that Reddit post. Suddenly, Earl had drawn an enormous amount of attention to something that had previously been sitting online relatively unnoticed. The man trying to put Smokey under a microscope had basically wheeled the microscope over to himself and been like, "Hey guys, look over here." And what Earl had written was not harmless internet cringe. In that confession, Earl described an incident with a coworker who he acknowledged at the time was a minor. Later, after the post was uncovered, Earl started insisting that she was actually 18. And then when he could no longer maintain that version of events, the age changed back to 17. So this is not the internet arguing over how old she was. Earl's own story changed. Fortunately, we don't have to rely entirely on an old Reddit post to establish what happened, because Earl eventually described the incident himself. Earl says he grabbed her shoulder, he says his hand slipped onto her chest, and then he acknowledges, "I groped someone. Yes, I groped a woman."
Walked this way. I swung my left arm over, grabbed her left shoulder. She turned around, way too fast for me to react. My hand slipped. It touched her chest.
And somehow that was not the end of the TheWhiteBowser story. It was barely the beginning. Now, at this point, you might think, surely having the internet uncover your Reddit confession would inspire a period of extremely cautious online behavior. You would have underestimated the TheWhiteBowser. Because after the Smokey situation, Earl showed up in another anime Discord server. And somehow we are about to get worse. Around the same time, Earl was also publicly defending his attraction to sexualized anime characters who were explicitly under 18. And I do not have to paraphrase that. Earl explained it himself. He says he found scenes from Chihuahua on Monday in Freezing sexually attractive, then acknowledges that the female characters are under 18. And yes, that is Earl explaining the controversy himself. He would go on to argue that the characters are fictional, that the distinction mattered, and that the people calling him a pedophile were wrong. Which brings us to one of the defining features of the TheWhiteBowser story, Earl trying to explain why everyone had misunderstood him. Earl made videos defending himself. He argued about definitions. He talked about what doctors supposedly told him. He threatened lawsuits. He debated people for hours. And practically every attempt to explain why everyone had misunderstood him gave the internet another clip to document. And whether Earl intended for any of this to become a scandal was never really the issue. The questions were what happened, how old were the people involved, and what did Earl himself admit to doing? And I think that distinction is especially important with TheWhiteBowser. Earl is autistic, he has a noticeable speech impediment, and the internet has absolutely made cheap jokes about both. Neither of those things is why I'm talking about him. Take away every joke about how Earl looks, how he sounds, or the way he communicates, the behavior is still there. The Reddit confession is still there. His own statements are still there. And the later Discord controversy is still there. The underlying story is disturbing without turning Earl's disabilities into the punchline. And that is the TheWhiteBowser story in miniature. Earl had a disturbing confession sitting mostly unnoticed online. He got kicked out of somebody else's Discord. He retaliated by making a public video about Smokey. People investigated him instead. They found the confession, and after people were already watching, Earl somehow kept making things worse. The more he said, the worse it got. And believe it or not, this is the condensed version. I have not gotten into the bomb threat, the psychiatric hospital, the screenshots, the people pretending to be his friends, or the truly ridiculous number of videos Earl made trying to explain himself. So if you want the full deep dive of TheWhiteBowser, tell me in the comments because there is so much more.